Hello and welcome to this round 4 of Grand Prix Stockholm. We've mentioned Luis Salvato and Reed Duke. They're both in our feature match area, but we're going to be seeing them on camera in our Time Walk matches. For now, at least, we're going to get a chance to see Alexa Talarov against Peter Viren. Talarov on blue-white control, one of the consensus choices for players on 3 buys. Peter Viren, though, he's on blue-red Pyromancer Ascension, and this is one of the variants on the Storm list.
Yeah, but it's actually not a Storm deck. It's more of a burn deck that's powered by Pyromancer Ascension. It's really an interesting take on actually blue-red deck lists that the Viren brothers have been tinkering with for a long time. You might remember Pascal Viren being very successful with his Thing in the Ice deck just at a recent Pro Tour.
Yeah, for now, though, it's Peter Viren just sort of not giving too much of the game away. Opt a deck, a card that's played in quite a few lists so far, and it may be that, depending on what Alexa Talarov knows, that for now he thinks he's in a straight-up mirror match.
Yeah, I don't know. These snow-covered islands already would make me a bit suspicious. Of course, you can play those in your white-blue control decks as well. To me, I would think of Storm as the most likely deck.
Yeah, once you see Sleight of Hand as well as Opt, that's a lot of cantrips to have in your blue-white control list. Meanwhile, Alexa Talarov nicely getting a good mix of lands into play these early stages of the game.
I have to get something off my chest, Tim. This trend to play 1 Ancestral Vision in your white-blue control decks is driving me crazy.
Would you rather it was more or fewer?
Well, 4 or 0. I think 1, and then just sometimes have it on turn 1 and have the nut draw. That seems ambitious, but I see it working out a lot, so maybe I'm just wrong about that.
Yeah, because there is just the singular Ancestral Vision for Alexa Talarov, and he was able to suspend it good and early. He will have the potential to draw lots of cards here. Meanwhile, Peter Viren, he needs to draw some lands because right now he's in a bit of a tough spot. His hand made a little bit more awkward by the fact that he didn't find that land there. Had to remand for Vendilion Click. All of that was in end step. So Peter Viren saying, I want to move to my end step, signaling that he's going to be discarding. Alexa Talarov flashed in Vendilion Click, but it was hit by a remand there, and then Burst Lightning discarded. All of a sudden, alarm bells raised for Talarov in terms of what he might find himself up against, because Burst Lightning, not so natural and include in a regular Storm deck.
No, that is not a card you would even want in a Storm deck.
So Field of Ruin in play now for Alexa Talarov. This is a card that's largely supplanted a Ghost Quarter for a lot of these control decks, a way of dealing with non-basics that doesn't cost you a land.
And there is Hieroglyphic Illumination, the new hotness in white-blue control decks and also in particular Jeskai control decks.
Remand on Ancestral Vision, I like that quite a bit. Sets the Ancestral Vision back a lot of turns here.
Yeah, that's the perfect answer, in fact. This is almost like remanding a flashback spell. Because the impact of Ancestral Visions now that the game has progressed for so long is actually low. Peter is climbing back into this game with this remand play, and it not getting countered is huge.
Yeah, it turns out that this is a matchup where there's enough time that missing a land drop isn't the complete death knell that it might be in other matchups.
So one thing that's important to note here is Peter will have a very good idea of 90% plus of what Alexa Talarov is running. Alexa has, apart from the cards he's seen so far, no idea what he's up against. Unless, of course, he has some outside information. But from the cards he's seen, there's no way that you could guess what exactly Peter Viren is up to this time. Yeah,
there's quite a lot of red-blue decks in the format, and they can kind of employ a number of different end games. I mean, in principle, you might look at this board and think, am I going to have to worry about Blood Moon, for example?
Yeah, very, very true. You can be very certain that it's not blue-red Wizards, because there hasn't been a single creature shown at all, and so far it just seems to be instants and sorceries.
Now, I mean, the interesting thing when we come to this sort of information mismatch is that almost by definition, when you see a deck that is less well represented in Modern, shall we say, it's going to be difficult for it to be of the same power level as one of the more established decks.
And this puts the fear into your opponent, right? You are threatening. We just saw it on the screen. Cards like Madcap Experiment. You're also threatening through the breach. You don't know what you're up against. It could just be 5 mana, instant speed, Emrakul showing up, and that's the beauty of Viren's deck choice here, who I think made this deck choice expecting a lot of control decks. Juicy.
So that's a remand on a flashback spell. You mentioned how good that is. Explain exactly why remanding a flashback spell feels so great.
So flashback spells have this clause that if they go off the stack, they are exiled no matter what. So remand just becomes a hard counter against anything with flashback.
And of course,
that has been flashback.
A hard counter that draws you a card. Everything that you want to be doing in Magic, pretty much.
Regarding the overall strategy of the game, like let's say the long-term strategy, you can see that Teleroth is happy to attack for a few points of damage here, but that's not going to be the decider. What it will come down to, at least that's what I assume, is whether Peter gets to resolve and keep Pyromancer Ascension in play. So this enchantment is where most of the fights are going to revolve around.
Pyromancer Ascension itself, a very interesting card, one that it's not going to matter too much if Peter Viren waits a little bit on getting it into play, because putting cards in the graveyard before you resolve your Ascension makes it that much easier to get it going. I mean, the way that the card reads, once it's in play, whenever you play a spell that there is already a copy of in your graveyard, it gets a counter. Once it has 2 counters on it, from then on, any spell that you play, it makes an additional copy of go onto the stack. And it does not take too many doubled up spells before you just overwhelm your opponent in value.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors my Red Bull consumption this morning.
That you had twice as much as I have, and you're overwhelming me with your power. So here comes Pyromancer Ascension, and a Spell Snare, just the most mana-efficient answer that you could hope to find. And
Teleroth is very far ahead on cards. We saw actually Hieroglyphic Illumination be a key part of the puzzle, with Alexa choosing to play this quote-unquote split card. You either get an opt-like effect or you get a divination, instant speed divination. So being able to cast it and flash it back in such a matchup is huge on the card advantage battle.
Yeah, and Hieroglyphic Illumination is one of those cards that's a relatively new addition. I think it was Ben Stark that was saying that he felt like it was a real upgrade to the blue-white control deck, because in terms of when you're looking at it versus opt, it's not that much worse than opt.
Yeah, it has the benefit of not being taxed by Thalia, by the way. So there are even some advantages. But small correction: I think Ben Stark is generally talking about Jeskai when he's mentioning Hieroglyphic Illumination as a 4-off, for example. He has been championing Jeskai decks, Jeskai control decks that have this burn alternative, burn plan. But the point, of course, is still true for white blue control. It's just that white blue control, I don't think would play for Hieroglyphic Illumination, simply because the deck space is not there.
So we saw a little bit of a flurry of counter magic there. Burst Lightning on Snapcaster Mage, ultimately resolving with the help of a negate to stop Cryptic Command, and that Ancestral Vision getting suspended again here by Teleroth, just wanting to make sure that he does stay ahead on cards here.
But Teleroth has to get nervous now. He doesn't have a clock anymore. He's down to 3 cards. He's drawn a lot of lands, none of which do anything. So what do I see? A hard counter, an Oust, that's a dead card, and a Censor, which is almost dead. Van Click, good draw though.
Peter Viren not putting on too much pressure for now, but we know that he has the potential to do big things. Another Vendilion Click coming along here. And it's not immediately obvious to me who the better person to target with this click would be.
Yeah, getting rid of that Oust, I think, would be great for Teleroth. But this is another one of these counter battles where, in the end, in the control matchups, you want to be the one that resolves Cryptic Command, and you want to deny Cryptic Command from resolving, which is actually not that hard because 4 mana is a huge investment. So a lot of also the white blue control or the Jeskai control mirrors, they revolve around whether somebody gets into a position to make their cryptic commands resolve. For example, with Dispel, by having more mana in play, or just having main deck negates.
So getting value off a Censor, not necessarily something that you could expect at this stage in the game, but Cryptic Command costing enough mana that Peter Viren not able to get things going, and we did see the Vendilion Click there, upgrading the final card in Telerov's hand, getting rid of that Oust, and hopefully finding him a bit of action.
Oh, and Telerov with some really nice draws here. The Vendilion Click potentially cleared the way for the Ancestral Visions, but also his 2 draw steps that he got off the Vendilion Click trigger and his natural draw steps yielded Celestial Colonnade and Serum Visions.
And the Serum Visions let him put Path to Exile to the bottom of his deck, which is a card that he doesn't really want to be drawing in this matchup.
Yeah, a lot of velocity from this deck.
And the final Cryptic Command to mean that this second Pyromancer Ascension unlikely to be able to achieve very much, because even here with the Snapcaster Mage to help force it through by finding presumably a negate here in the graveyard to get it going.
Or maybe you remand your own Pyromancer Ascension to draw a few more cards. I don't know how much time Peter has. He's under a lot of pressure, but if he can't put enough counters on the Pyromancer Ascension with his natural draw, then remanding your own spell is always a nice alternative as well.
Yeah, working with a Pyromancer Ascension and 0 cards in hand, he's going to have to do something pretty impressive here to really see the benefits of that enchantment.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if he doesn't Lightning Bolt this turn, then he's dead in 2 turns to Alexa's creatures. Oh,
all right. Serum Visions is essentially ideal here. Lets him get an extra counter and means that he's going to be able to potentially get a little bit more going with the draw and the scry. Sadly for him, I think that he drew into a land there.
No, it's a Lightning Bolt.
Oh, really?
I think he's in pretty good shape, or I would say it's about even now, with the Celestial Colonnade and Ancestral Visions giving Alexa Telerov a lot of things to do. But Peter has an active Ascension, and like I said, the whole game has revolved around getting this to resolve. And Peter picked his spots, picked his fights, fought smartly before the second Ancestral Vision came off suspend. Is under pressure, but let's not forget, Lightning Bolt can also target players.
So if you're Telerov and you've seen your opponent scry 2 cards to the top when they have Pyromancer Ascension in play, does the temptation to use Field of Ruin or maybe Path to Exile on Snapcaster Mage increase just to force that shuffle?
Oh, interesting. I think I would just Path to Exile the Snapcaster Mage, to be honest. But bouncing the Pyromancer Ascension was definitely the right play. I'm surprised that Telerov doesn't use the Path because of the scry that you mentioned.
So Pyromancer Ascension comes down. Now we have Serum Visions, in response to which, here's that Path.
Yeah, I would have liked to see the Path on upkeep, for example. Telerov had that single white mana open and nothing to do otherwise.
Terminus and a land in hand for Alexa Telerov. Neither of those feel like the key cards in this matchup. I mean, he's got Viren on 2, so he does have Celestial Colonnade to potentially close things out, but Peter Viren, when he's got Pyromancer Ascension and can potentially get things going with Serum Visions here, still has a chance. And a slow motion Snapcaster heading into exile. Is this Peter maybe wondering whether or not he can elect to just not search?
Yep, that's exactly what's happening. Path to Exile is not like Field of Ruins. It doesn't force you to search. Well, yeah, I guess it's a May ability. I don't know.
All right, so we have a nearly active Pyromancer Ascension, 4 mana to work with. So there is a Lightning Bolt in hand for Peter Viren, but he needs to get Pyromancer Ascension active,
which
involves casting said lightning bolt.
Now if he has a Manamorphose, he's going off.
So Manamorphose, one of the cards that's at its very best when you've got Pyromancer Ascension in play, in that it functionally generates extra mana while drawing you 2 cards.
Look at what Alexa is doing, by the way. He's now getting a very good look at Peter Viren's deck list. Even if he's losing this game, which is not guaranteed, he might as well win it. This means he has in short-term memory the picture of what Peter Viren is trying to do.
And Telerov already looking at his sideboard here. That is something you're allowed to do at any point in a game these days.
I think that's his way of F6ing in real life.
I mean, he's tapped out as well, and this is not the sort of deck that you would anticipate running the likes of Pact of Negation.
A bit of mind games as well.
Yeah.
Just saying, look, do what you want. I'm going to activate my Colonnade next turn. Show me something.
I mean, 9 life, that's an achievable amount of damage for Peter Viren.
Ooh, actually, Burst Lightning is already 8 points. With kicker.
With kicker.
Without kicker, it's 4. Maybe Peter has a Snapcaster.
I mean, the fact that he's playing the Burst Lightning here, suggesting that he feels confident of being able to do something else to deal with Celestial Colonnade, potentially.
I think he's trying to remand it.
Remanding his own Burst Lightning.
But he doesn't have red mana.
He has 1 red mana floating.
Yeah, floating, but he doesn't have a red mana untapped to kill the Colonnade.
Maybe this is a matter of just trying to draw a lot of cards.
Oh, I think actually, yeah. I think he remanded both of his copies.
Yes.
So that he would get to draw 2 cards, but didn't get there.
All right. So,
but couldn't you just? Well, I guess he didn't have the red mana left.
Because the red mana was only from Manamorphose.
But could he have tapped differently? He didn't need that much red mana to begin with.
Potentially may have been able to tap things differently, but I think that part of it comes down to he drew the Burst Lightning from Manamorphose, so it would have required him to think ahead sufficiently to figure out which of the branching options worked out best for him. Ultimately, the options that he had didn't work out super well. Alexa Telerov picking up game 1, and while Telerov has been looking at his sideboard for the last couple minutes, Peter Viren playing catch-up in that regard.
Yep. These guys should not have trouble finishing their match in time, though. Let's look at the sideboards. So Peter Viren actually has 4 Thing in the Ice in the sideboard. Not for this matchup, of course, unless he wants to have an alternative game plan, which I doubt. And then just a few more counters, very counter-heavy deck, a bit more removal. And 2 Young Pyromancers. Those I could definitely see coming in.
Yeah, I like being able to keep Telerov on his toes a little bit when it comes to creature removal. I would imagine that Telerov is likely to consider removing some amount of the removal that he has in his main deck.
I don't think you want to draw your Supreme Verdicts and Terminus against the Pyromancer Ascension combo deck. No, Celestial Purge, really nice card to have there. More counter magic, always good, negates. I would bring in Rest in Peace.
Rest in Peace feels like a very solid answer to a lot of what the Ascension list is doing, at least in terms of the Ascension itself. If you have
the space anyway, because you're taking out that much removal, you can even throw in the one-off Surgical Extraction. It's not amazing, but if you get to counter one of the key cards, then having Surgical in your hand is going to be much better than, let's say, a Path to Exile or one of these mass removal spells.
I must admit that Surgical Extraction is a card that I have an unhealthy obsession with almost when it comes to making a sideboard in Modern. Because it's something that can be cast for Phyrexian mana, it means that, at least in principle, it is an interesting sideboard card for every single deck in the format. Obviously, at its best against decks that have a key linchpin card, and ideally being played in decks that can reliably put one of those linchpin cards in the graveyard without necessarily having to worry about it having already made it into play.
Yeah, my problem, I also like the card, but my problem with Surgical Extraction right now is almost all the graveyard decks have built-in redundancy. So it's not that the one key card that you need to hit.
Yeah, I would almost say that I don't think of it as a piece of graveyard hate so much as a good card to have against decks that have a sort of a very focused combo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, against Storm, it's definitely very good to have. Against Dredgewine, it's good to have because Bridge from Below, for example, is very hard to deal with, and Vengevine, of course, as well. Against Hollow One, it's a necessary evil. Look at that. Draw Step, Ancestral Visions.
I don't know what it's like to live in that world, but
Me neither.
so far, Alexa Telerov seems to be doing all right with it. But a turn 2 Thing in the Ice after a turn 1 Serum Vision for Peter Viren could spell a relatively quick game 2 if Alexa can't find a way of dealing with it.
So Peter is going for this transformative sideboard plan. He's saying, I don't need all these burn spells in this matchup. I'm not gonna burn my opponent out realistically. If I land a Pyromancer Ascension, I'm winning, well, most likely anyway, except for game 1. So let's just bring in the Thing in the Ice as well and overload Telerov's removal.
Now, depending on how much history there is between these two players, people that have watched Peter Viren coverage quite a bit might reasonably have predicted that Thing in the Ice was somewhere in this 75.
Yes. From my experience, most people watch a lot less coverage than we do, Tim.
I think that's fair.
I don't think you can expect every player that is playing GPs or PTs to know exactly what every other player was on at the last Modern PT. There is a...
Once people make top 8 with things, though, I think that
Sure.
it becomes more reasonable to have it in your radar a little bit somewhere in there. So Search for Azcanta here for Alexa Telerov. Already in play, and that one of the big additions to blue-white control in the last few sets that has really seen it step up its game.
Yeah, one of my favorite cards from recent years.
And one that I can only imagine is going to get a little bit better even with Guilds of Ravnica in the mix, what with some of the machinations of the Dimir Guild.
Even better.
Serum Visions here, doing double duty, both drawing cards for Peter Viren and meaning that Thing in the Ice looking a little bit more foreboding.
Yeah, you don't want to run your Thing in the Ice head first into a Jace, though. So just like in all the control matchups, keeping cards like Jace and Teferi off the battlefield is really critical.
And Peter Viren here, he's holding up mana for potential counter magic. So a Jace will be a little bit fiddly for Telerov to resolve.
Yeah, but Telerov is not going to slam it here. Why? He has Search for Azcanta active. He has good mana development and an Ancestral Vision. So he can just wait, and then Viren is going to be the first that has to act. Of course, Cryptic Command is very unlikely to resolve as usual, but look, if Viren doesn't play lands, I think this is almost a replay of game 1 in that sense. If Viren stops deploying lands to the battlefield, you are the one that's making continuous advantages with control.
So a slightly aggro Cryptic Command there eats a Dispel. But this does now mean that Ancestral Vision will be that much easier to resolve, one would imagine.
Of course, Ancestral Vision not an instant, but Alexa knows that these Cryptic Commands are actually kind of bad counters in his hand. He had drawn 2 of them already, plus the Jace. So very intentionally ran it into the Dispel there.
Okay, so this a big spell on the stack right now. Ancestral Vision representing just a huge amount of cards. And Peter Viren, he does have a negate in hand, but it seems likely that this blue-white control deck can deal with one counter spell. Is it still worth it to throw the counter magic down here?
I mean, Viren is the one that's not developing his mana, so he needs to empty his hand. If he doesn't cast his spells and doesn't play lands, what is he going to do? Telerov can just starve him out by playing Land Go for a couple of turns, and Viren is not going to get anywhere. Of course, the Thing in the Ice is the big difference maker. However, because of the threat of Jace and Teferi, I do agree with this line of play. It's still going to get punished by Alexa. I think Alexa will... we will see Alexa play Jace. Okay. I thought we would see Jace protected with a Dispel, bounce the Thing in the Ice, and then that's that.
As it happens, negate coming down for this Detention Sphere and Dispel back. That meaning that the Thing in the Ice briefly transforming.
Okay, no, I like this line as well, because the 2 loyalty Jace would have been exposed to burn spells very easily, and by playing it this way, Alexa will most likely want to +2 with Jace on the first activation to get it out of reach of Burst Lightning and Lightning Bolt. This is where Viren should deploy the Young Pyromancer just to have something on the battlefield for potential Planeswalkers.
All right, so Young Pyromancer plus a token, thanks to that sleight of hand.
I really liked how the blue-red deck performed in game 1. It got very close to parity on cards with the white-blue control deck, which is not something that a lot of decks can do in Modern. But here it looks like a different story. It looks like white-blue control is too easily running away with the game. And also I was not too impressed with, for example, what the Thing in the Ice, the impact that Thing in the Ice had on this battlefield.
So Jace comes along and deals with Young Pyromancer. It's not going to take very much in the way of burn for Peter Viren to deal with that first Jace. But Alexa Talarov has 3 mana up and has Spellqueller in hand.
Yeah, but Spellqueller is actually not good in this matchup, because there are so many Lightning Bolts in Peter's deck that he will want to keep in exactly because of Spellqueller, but also Jace and Teferi. So we will see. Well, I expect that this Spellqueller will immediately die. Of course, Jace gets to live for another turn. That's the big point here. If Viren wants, he can try to kill Jace here, but he gets punished very heavily if there's another Jace in Alexa's hand, and Young Pyromancer is his one way to victory. I don't see him resolving much else of relevance with how the game has been going on. And there's actually another Jace drawn by Talarov, so he could go for the bounce your Pyromancer again, Jace, Brainstorm, just to play almost like a tempo game.
I think I like that play. Get that disloyal Jace out of there and then work with a more loyal iteration.
If you want to -1 a Jace, it's when you have another one in hand.
So Serum Vision setting things up for Talarov here. He's drawn a land off it and he's just deciding whether or not he wants another one. He's put the land to the bottom, I believe, kept Snapcaster Mage on top.
This also gives him the most information about what to do with his Jaces. Now he knows what he will draw from a Brainstorm, and whether he wants to go for an alternative line, for example, involving Snapcaster Mage and Cryptic Command. Hasn't been able to use the Azcanta at all, which is something that you really want to do, of course.
Does bounce that Young Pyromancer once again. Azcanta the Sunken Rune, yeah. At the moment, thus far, it's just functioned as an island. And Talarov just passing things back with plenty of mana available to deal with whatever comes next.
And here it's actually interesting whether you try to fight over the Young Pyromancer with your Cryptic Command, or if you're happy just activating Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. The decision what to do there depends very heavily on what the rest of your deck is composed of. If you know that you've taken out most of your answers to Young Pyromancer, then you have to fight over it. If you know that there are there are a bunch of well, Supreme Verdicts, as unlikely as that sounds, left in your deck, it's a lot less of a problem.
So Jace having to deal with Young Pyromancer for a turn there. We're in a weird sort of a Groundhog Day situation here where every turn this Young Pyromancer comes along, every turn it seems to end up back in Peter Viren's hand here. This time round, he did not need to use counter magic to make sure that his Young Pyromancer resolved. Not so much going on in Telerov's hand right now, but that could all change thanks to Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
Absolutely. So Peter knows that Alexa is going to activate the Azcanta, and often, no, doesn't do it. Wow. That's some restraint. So for those that are confused by this, the reason that Alexa doesn't tap out for Azcanta is that a burn spell in response kills his Jace and gives Peter another counter, another token, sorry. So valuing that Jace so highly that that you are declining the free card from the Azcanta.
So there, Jace once again bouncing Young Pyromancer. This is an unusual way for the Young Pyromancer Jace interaction to go over the course of this many turns, but
this is a super interesting game from a high level strategic perspective because of how the white-blue control deck is forced into inconvenient spots because of the way sideboarding works in this matchup and how you can actually win the game against the Young Pyromancer in particular, but also burn spells and everything that's going on. So Peter actually playing perfectly by putting this Pyromancer out there over and over again and saying, you have to deal with this 2-1, or I'm just going to go run one array with this game.
So here we have Snapcaster Mage on Cryptic Command.
And
I feel like we might need a counter on how many times this Young Pyromancer has potentially been bounced here.
Yeah, I think we need a... Oh, that's aggressive. Wow, I think Alexa is getting really desperate. Look at this. Just cycle my illumination, trying to find something. Not a single Azcanta activation. That shows you that something has gone really wrong here.
Well, he brought in Rest in Peace, but right now Rest in Peace not good enough, getting sent to the bottom. And Peter Viren, now he's got lands, gets to utilize that grip full of cards. Serum Vision's generating another elemental. Those first few elementals almost certain to be swinging in at some point this turn.
Yeah, don't forget that there's a Celestial Colonnade hiding in Telerov's lands. If you have a Lightning Bolt, that's fine. If you don't, then maybe you don't want to attack. However, Telerov has also declined to animate the Colonnade every single time he had the chance. Finally.
It turns out that the Sunken Ruin, it felt like it was lost for a few additional turns based on how long it took to actually end up using it. But Cryptic Command, the card that's found in that little dig through the top of cards on Telerov's deck, and he's drawn a Rest in Peace even after he put one of them to the bottom of his deck.
The Azcanta revealed 2 lands and a Lyra, so it almost missed, and he put the Lyra on the bottom of his deck.
We could have another counter war on our hands here, and that seems to favour Peter Viren here, given that he's getting value on each and every time that a counter gets played, simply because it's triggering his Young Pyromancer here.
I have to wonder whether Alexa would have been better off playing it risky and activating Azcanta when his Jace was under pressure. Because this game plan of, I will have my Jace for one more turn, but then I'm going to minus it anyway to bounce your Young Pyromancer really didn't work out.
So this time round, there are a few choices to be made in terms of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. We can see Celestial Purge, Surgical Extraction, and a Dispel there, all powerful in their own right. What are your thoughts here, Simon?
My thinking is that Celestial Purge is the one answer you are probably having in your deck for defeating a young Pyromancer. And maybe the amount of tokens is still manageable. No, for sure it's still manageable, but it really depends on the upcoming exchange.
So for now, Telerov passing things back. Peter Viren with the potential to make a few more elementals at some point.
But every mana he spends now means that he has less counter magic available. So this is an aggressive mana Morphos. You know your opponent is just waiting to fire off that Celestial Purge, and has to because the pressure is so high.
Now Peter knows about a Cryptic Command in hand for Alexa Telerov.
Yeah, that's why I don't like this mana Morphos. Look how different the spot is if you have 6 mana available. Okay. That was easy.
Viren just has to let his young Pyromancer go. Finally, young Pyromancer dealt with.
Maybe he has another one.
Not even an opt or similar to do much with following, but drawn into a Pyromancer Ascension now.
Interesting. I was wondering whether he still had all 4 of them in his deck, because he is expecting a lot of graveyard hate, I would assume, or at least those rest in pieces to come in.
And that really the difference when you have a well-established deck with maybe a slightly more speculative one, that for Peter Viren, he can reasonably expect that there are rest in peace in the sideboard and that they could be coming in against his Ascension. So this is a Cryptic Command, by the looks of it, targeting that Celestial Colonnade.
Mm-hmm. And this is a tricky play because this is done before the Colonnade is allowed to block. So actually I think it's done with the activation on the stack. That's not the most relevant part, but here Telerov, if he wants to Cryptic back, first of all, he's playing into Viren's open mana, and second of all, even if he gets to win the counter war, he's still taking damage, and Viren can deploy something.
Yeah, interesting heads-up play here from Peter Viren, and he is very experienced with this kind of deck. Something that he is going to have to look out for, though. 13 minutes left on this clock, currently a game down. It's going to take him a couple of turns to win this one, and I can see the merits, especially of a Thing in the Ice plan for a deck like this, in part due to clock management. It's much easier to win things when you've got a big creature.
I think Telerov has to be more concerned about the clock than Viren, in fact. Pyromancer Ascension, Young Pyromancer, Thing in the Ice, those cards can win quickly. It's still going to be a challenge. Both of these players have been playing brisk. It's not. It's just a matter of how the matchup plays out. And now I believe that Telerov will have a very powerful rest in peace to answer this Pyromancer Ascension, because it's basically a dead card afterwards. Does make Logic not quite a bit weaker.
I don't think he can afford to be too picky right now, though. 4 mana. Are we going to see a Cryptic Command here?
He has rest in peace in hand, right?
I believe so.
Maybe he wants to draw another counter from Peter. Let's say bait a Dispel, but I think with the Ascension basically being answered by the by the rest in peace, you want to definitely bounce something else. Detention Sphere makes sense to me. I was even thinking of just bouncing one of the elemental tokens, because now you still have to deal with Thing in the Ice eventually.
I guess that the Thing in the Ice will deal with the elemental tokens if you let it.
Well, Peter is not gonna have that happen, I believe.
Okay, so Detention Sphere for the elementals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the problematic cards for Alexa at the moment. He can deal with one creature much better than he can deal with multiple. And Thing in the Ice, especially, he can punish with bounce very nicely. I like this as well.
This is a cool line.
We are seeing a lot of high-level plays here. Lightning Bolt, my elemental token that's targeted with the Detention Sphere trigger, so that if the Lightning Bolt resolves, the Detention Sphere doesn't take the other 2 tokens. And then Peter is thinking, okay, I'm getting the Pyromancer Ascension, I'm getting the Thing in the Eyes, this is looking great. And then Telerov has the rest in peace to make the Pyromancer Ascension effectively irrelevant.
He also has the Logic Knot to make sure that the The lightning bolt does not resolve.
And he had the logic not before he cast the Rest in Peace. So his sequencing this turn was all about baiting a response from Peter, and that's why he bounced the Detention Sphere and played the spells in exactly this order. Now, if Peter gets to cast 3 spells here, he's just hitting for 7, by the way. He doesn't care about his graveyard anymore. Oh, this is a burn spell. I think
a burst lightning just aimed directly at their head here.
That's it. He's going for lethal.
Boom.
Beautiful. Beautiful game.
What a game of Magic, and that means that Peter Viren able to square things up, and we're going to get a chance to see a game 3 between these guys. And at 9 minutes and change left on the clock, they're going to have to get a brisk game in. Peter Viren has the tools to be able to win fast. Alexa Telerov, he might have to get some pretty specific draws if he's going to be able to find himself a win in these early stages. And worth noting that in our relatively small 3-buy metagame, we call it, the players that are at the absolute top of the game that have elected to show up with whichever deck they should show up with, the best players, they do seem to like this blue-white control list.
I think blue-white control is the number one choice for pro players at the moment. It's just there's no clear best deck in Modern.
I'm going to interrupt you, Simon, because I've just heard that we're going to get a chance to see the climax of the Luis Salvato match, because he is one of the players. This is live. This is not Time Walk. This is just sort of jumping across here. He has his blue-white control list in pretty good position here against black-green mid-range. And the reason that we're jumping across to this is in part because Luis Salvato, 3rd-ranked player in the world right now, at the end of this tournament could be the number 1 ranked player if he's able to get things going. And potentially he could close this out very fast here. His Teferi on 8 loyalty here, his Jace on 5 loyalty. If he can win this match quickly, this is very important. But if he can't win this match quickly, that could be a big door open to Reed Duke, who is aiming at having to do a little bit better than him if he's going to get Player of the Year.
I think with the Teferi emblem in play, that is it.
All right, so we've got a little bit more information about how our Player of the Year race going, which is that Luis Salvato able to get his 2-1 out. And you know what? I would venture to suggest that we're still going to get a chance to see all of Game 3 because these guys just finishing their sideboarding there. So a brief look in there on one of the important matches going on in our feature match area. Depending on how time works on this last game, if it works out that we've still got time left before we get into round 5, we might even be able to show you a little bit of Reed Duke.
We have a whole weekend in front of us. I think we will see plenty of Luis Salvato and Reed Duke with their storylines and also their recent successes at the GPs. I would be very surprised if we don't see them in day 2.
Yeah, and if we don't see them in day 2, then we will have a very pleased with himself Seth Manfield over in the other side of the world, watching on and seeing how the 2 players that can potentially catch him up end up doing at this last GP in the season before our World Championship. All right, so it looks like we've had a mulligan from Telerov. And Peter Viren here, has he accidentally drawn too many cards? This could be unfortunate. Or it may be that this is Viren saying, I hadn't actually decided whether or not I was mulliganing my hand yet. Alexa's already... so yeah, Peter has apparently mulliganed and drawn 7. Mm-hmm. Now, the way that this works out, if we go to our top-down camera just so we can see what's going on, when you end up taking a mulligan and drawing too many cards, the penalty for it is essentially your opponent gets to look at your hand and figure out which card you're not going to get to keep.
Yep. I love it and I hate this rule at the same time. It doesn't feel great, but it's a very elegant solution in the sense that it never gives you an advantage from having that extra card. But of course, it's much worse if your opponent gets to choose which card to take.
And unlike this being a Thoughtseize, you can choose to take a land here.
It's a very good Thoughtseize, yeah. And Telerov is on a mulligan himself, so he also understands the clock situation very well. Thing in the Eyes is the scariest card in this hand and with 2 cantrips and 2 lands, you're not going to short Viren on mana, realistically. Knowledge of the 2 Remans also very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So Peter Viren here, the mulligans all dealt with. I'm guessing that these guys will get an extra minute or 2 maybe based on having to get a judge call in there. But 5 minutes plus some stoppage time. Let's go with that. These guys, nothing's changed. They still need to play pretty quickly if they're going to get to a result here. It's 2 scries to the bottom there off Serum Visions. Alexa Telerov. For now, he's got a Celestial Purge. He's got a Teferi. I can definitely see why there was the worry about the thing in the ice. A pickup of Young Pyromancer here for Peter Viren. That another win condition potentially, but one that is susceptible to a Celestial Purge.
Yep. And Telerov basically playing his lands in order to represent all kinds of 2-mana interactive spells, so that Viren is not happy to just run out a Pyromancer, which is really not the point in time where you want to play it against a control deck.
All right, so these guys just carrying on through here. Sleight of hand. 1 card's going to hand, 1's going on the bottom. Looks like negate the pickup there for Viren.
Mm-hmm. Better choice than Lightning Bolt.
We've been told that essentially no extra time there in terms of how things worked out. Cryptic Command on a land here. A little shake of the head from you there, Simon.
Viren is missing his land drops in the 3rd game in a row. This is, to me, just... I don't want to say a sign of bad deck building, but it shows that something is not going quite well with this. It seems like the deck is not well-rounded enough with regards to cantrips, lands, and actual action spells.
It looks like there's about 20 or so lands in this deck, which is definitely on the low end of things when it comes to how many lands you would typically expect to see in Modern. But then there are a lot of cantrips, and figuring out the exact number of lands to play in those sorts of decks can get a little fiddly.
Especially if you are on this kind of rogue strategy that you don't have the hive mind to support you with how many lands should I be playing, what is the correct number. But look at this matchup. In the end, it's all about mana.
Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. There's a Remand, but there's a Dispel for that Remand.
There's another Remand, but there's a Dispel for that, or a Negate and a Dispel for that, and then Teferi's on the battlefield.
Resolve Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. If Alexa Telerov's going to win this match, he's doing all the right things thus far.
I think he's just fetching there to save time, or also to thin out his deck marginally. Playing very quickly now.
Thing in the ice is in hand for Peter Viren. He's got Disdainful Stroke a little bit too late potentially for the maiden threats. Here comes Young Pyromancer, but we know that there's Celestial Purge available to Alexa Telerov.
Good timing on the Pyromancer. Telerov, by the way, Path to Exile back in the deck. Smart.
Yeah, these spot adjustments important. I mean, that's the way that he was going to lose a quick game, was to one of the big creatures. Big in terms of imports rather than necessarily size, because while Young Pyromancer, not a large creature on its own.
I think Telerov might have to attack here with the Colonnade. He has a 4-turn clock, and Viren doesn't have many ways to interact with a Colonnade. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, this turn of even a kicked Burst Lightning, not enough.
And you don't even have time to really think about it. You just have to do it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, this is Telerov playing to win. He's not playing to not lose. He doesn't really want to be in the draw bracket all day playing mirrors.
The thing is, you can even raise a Pyromancer with that line.
Path to Exile on Young Pyromancer. Yeah, these Pyromancers facing a much stiffer bit of competition in Game 3 than they did in Game 2.
Yeah, Game 2, Telerov was probably kicking himself for taking out all his answers to creatures, because he was looking cold to that young Pyromancer. In the end, it was a lot closer than I thought, but would have been a lot easier had he had a single Supreme Verdict in his deck.
Snapcaster Mage also in hand here, so that another way potentially of getting a little bit more power and toughness on the battlefield if he absolutely needs. But the important thing here is to continue attacking in with these Celestial Colonnades. 10 seconds left on the clock, and the difference, he has a very achievable amount of damage left to deal as this game goes to extra turns here, having made those attacks. Yep. Those attacks not obvious if you're playing a game with 50 minutes left on the clock. I don't think you make those attacks.
Then you don't have to. It might still have been correct in this particular spot, because there is always this chance that you're not winning the long game. Of course, that's unlikely with Teferi in play. But yeah, with the clock is an important part of tournament magic, so taking it into account is just a sign of being on top of things.
So Thing in the Ice is in play, and there is the potential for Peter Viren to engineer things to be able to transform that Thing in the Ice while Alexa has an animated Celestial Colonnade. So Path to Exile comes down, Manamorphose in response to it. Peter desperately trying to dig for an appropriate answer. The Disdainful Stroke in his hand will not suffice, but he does look like he does have a negate. Gonna have to tap mana for that negate.
No, he Manamorphose.
Manamorphose mana, yes.
Now the players are just scrapping, you know, just trying to one-up each other.
And this Dispel means that there's also the potential for, yeah, after a remand, here's the Censor over the top.
Once again.
Every time Censor has worked out for Alexa Telerov, it has felt like just the biggest play of the game.
Yep. Maybe it's even better than Hieroglyphic Illumination, if that's possible.
Yeah, once you go down this path of your interesting one-mana cyclers, turns out there's a few options available to Blue-White Control here, and you see the big die of doom there at the top of the screen. It is the count on extra turns. This is turn 1 of 5, meaning that each of these players need to find their damage in just a few short turns. That's 5 turns shared between these players. Not long at all left on this game, and Alexa Telerov all business now as he once again animates Celestial Colonnade, tries to make sure that this game can get closed out just as quickly as possible. Both
of these players have been playing very quickly. In the end result is that Alexa has 3 turns, including this one, to close out the game. Viren's already at 1. I expect a concession here very, very, very soon.
I mean, nearly enough lands here. I think that 2 Celestial Colonnades could be attacking next turn, and that would mean 3 lethal attackers, 1 blocker. Not looking good for the Belgian.
Yeah, actually, that's not how you would play it. You would just animate one of them, and then because you don't want to expose yourself to Cryptic Command or something, something that could stop both colonnades from getting through.
So Snapcaster Mage helping dig here. Finds a Burst Lightning, but I think that Peter Viren's going to be 1 mana short on being able to use Burst Lightning to kill off a Celestial Colonnade here. There's the handshake. Alexa Telerov picking up the win with Blue-White Control in a very quick game. Good work from him, really analyzing where things were working on the clock, recognizing that he had to be really aggressive with those lands, had the key removal when he needed it, able to close things out. Good job, Alexa.
The rogue choice of Blue-Red Thing in the Ice not really working out.
It's been a tough old day for the Rogues, and there's plenty left on this day. That round 4 completed, but we will have a whole bunch more rounds for you. It's going to be Raph and Riley after these messages. Don't go anywhere for more magic here from Grand Prix Stockholm. Hello and welcome back to this coverage of round 4 of Grand Prix Stockholm. We have just a tiny bit more magic to bring you because, well, we got a chance to see Luis Salvato briefly on camera winning his match, but we've got Reed Duke, the other player, chasing Player of the Year in our feature match area as well. We're going to jump into this match part-way through, basically so that we don't have to have it on massive fast forward. Reed Duke won his game 1 and we're now into game 2 against Eleanor Holm's Spirits list. Eleanor a little bit up on life here. She's got Rattle Chains in play, she's got Mausoleum Wanderer, but Tarmogoyf has something to say about those life totals. Getting to get stuck in for just a little bit of damage because right now those Tarmogoyfs, they've not got too much to feed on.
Yeah, true. They are actually tiny, which explains the life total difference here.
Now, in this matchup, the Spirits, they get to largely ignore what's going on the ground here. Abzan, aside from Lingering Souls, not replete with flyers.
This is true in most modern matchups, actually. There are not many flyers in modern.
And I love the fact that, so Reed Duke, he's been walking around today while he's on his buys, lots of people checking up on him, seeing how he's doing, saying hello and whatnot. And he wasn't particularly shy about what deck he was playing. People know that he loves playing various green-black lists, whether they're Jund or Abzan, and when people were asking, he was just like, yeah, I'm on Abzan, and you can see how long he's been playing variations on this. A large proportion of the cards in his deck signed. He's got the artwork on lands that he really likes. He's got it all working for him, and the one thing that he doesn't have right now is potentially a whole lot of time in this game too, because Fatal Push getting countered by Negate here, he's the one that's very much on the back foot, and if Eleanor has almost any spirit to flash in with that Ether Vial, it could be that we're going to be going to a game 3. Another Fatal Push here from Reed Duke. Really wants to deal with some of the creatures on this side of the battlefield.
Also wants a spirit to go to the graveyard so that his Tarmogoyfs are turning this into a 2-turn clock at least. Picking his fight there. The life link on Shambling Vents could also be quite relevant.
I mean, a Mishra's Bauble here just for 2 extra damage would be kind of interesting. Eleanor Holm, though, with that Ether Vial up, there are a lot of spirits that cost 3 that have to be a concern for Reed, who is carefully figuring out what he wants to be doing this turn.
Thoughtseize myself, discard Liliana, Mishra's Bauble, and somehow
activate this Shambling Vent.
Get a Bitter Blossom into the graveyard. Okay.
Collective Brutality gets a sorcery into the graveyard here. Trog Skull Captain, that one of the variety of different ways that plans could be stymied here, but an Abrupt Decay on the Trog Skull Captain.
Yeah, and Reed played this beautifully. He knew that a hexproof spirit was on the horizon, so he sequenced his spells exactly in the way that he could play around it. Here there's a bit of confusion, but because the Rattle Chains has hexproof, but then it's getting Abrupt Decay. Well, the Drogso Captain is getting Abrupt Decay, then the Rattle Chains loses hexproof again.
And then the life change on enabled by Collective Brutality here, very important. There's the Path to Exile. So Reed not there with just the natural perfect 10 damage coming through, but
I don't think it would have been 10. I think it would have been 8. This is Eduardo Sagically taught me this. Instant sorcery creature land is like the normal card types in the graveyard, so you're always looking at the difference.
Yeah, the artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers, and I guess tribal.
Yeah. The exception.
All right, so right now it's Tarmogoyf and that Shambling Vent, we mustn't forget about it, up against whatever Eleanor Holm can bring along here. Spirit's largely a creatures deck, so I would anticipate there being 1 or 2 creatures coming into play here. Supreme Phantom, one of the cards that has elevated this deck to the position that it's now in standard, in modern rather, which is pretty good.
Yep. Some people calling it the better version of humans even. No, I'm not convinced yet about that. as you can see, you need a lot of cards on the battlefield. You're not playing defense very well. A deck like Abzan, as unpopular as it is right now, is just picking apart your synergies, basically.
So Elna here still has that Ether Vial with which to flash in another creature potentially.
And Reed, once again, very patient, doesn't cast his Maelstrom Pulse.
The life gain off that Shambling Vent could prove pretty important here. 4 to 11 now after combat damage resolved. And the fact that Ether Vial not activated at all there, potentially signaling quite a lot about what's going on in Elna Holm's hand here.
Yeah, and just like the Humans deck, the Spirits deck can flood out. Or just if you draw 3 Ether Vials, that's the Ether Vial version of flooding out.
So at this point, Mausoleum Wanderer may represent simply a speed bump for this Tarmogoyf at this point. It's got a taste for blood, a taste for graveyards, and at this point it won't have to do much more feasting before the meal's over.
I was a bit surprised that the Supreme Phantom just blocked the Tarmogoyf instead of the Shambling Vents, because that meant that Holm didn't have a realistic way back to assemble a threatening board.
Duke here still respecting what could come from Elna's hand.
Yeah, and now what he's thinking about is whether he should go for the same attack that he made last turn. So attack with Tarmogoyf and Shambling Vents and accept the fact that Holm can chump block to survive. Or do you now have the read on the fact that there is no 3-drop Spirit in Holm's hand, and even if there is, it's not going to be enough to survive this play.
So Maelstrom Pulse gets played on Maelstrom Wanderer to just make this a little bit easier in this Maelstrom theme deck. And there is the handshake. I want to briefly just mention that Reed actually wrote a really interesting article about exactly that kind of information, the idea of trying to get a read on when to attack and when not. That he cites his success in this most recent season to being a little bit more aggressive rather than just always taking the conservative line. As things stand, there he had it all, but in other circumstances, definitely worth being aggressive. But that is the end of our round 4 here. We hope you enjoyed getting the matches in that we have. We're going to have a bit of Raf and Riley for you with round 5 very shortly indeed, because our next round very soon up. Do not go anywhere. Right after these messages, more magic from Grand Prix Stockholm.